Boker Tov, Shalom Aleichem, everyone. Welcome back to the Aliyah Day. Glad to be with you this morning. Hope you're having a great day, being blessed, being encouraged. This morning, we're going to be talking about the wells that Isaac redug. These were wells that his father Abraham had dug, and he comes along after the Philistines had filled in these wells, and he redigs the wells. And we're going to be learning about the spiritual message that sends, because in a lot of ways, we here at Lapid Judaism are redigging ancient wells that our fathers, such as Yaakov and Kepha and Mattisyahu and others, dug, and with the true gospel. And they were later filled in by the Philistines, the uncircumcised teachings of Paul and the church fathers and Constantine. And we are now redigging those wells and seeing the fresh water spring forth again. And so we're going to be looking at this and see what the insights have to say to us. Todah Rabbah to Zake and Yigal, who filled in for me yesterday. Rabbi Singer and I were out of town on a bit of an excursion, and I appreciate him filling in for us yesterday. Now, I wanted to mention something because yesterday Rabbi Singer and I had the opportunity to go to a kosher restaurant, and this kosher restaurant was owned and operated by a Chabad group, and so the restaurant itself was wonderful, and the food was great, and no complaints there, and no complaints at all, really. But it was just really an observation. I was, we were there eating and having a good time. I was looking around at some of the information they had and some of the artwork that they had and so forth. And so I just wanted to mention this as really kind of a public service announcement. Some of you, probably most of you, already know this, but there might be somebody out there who is paying attention to the program and is not aware of this fact with respect to Chabad, and I want to make it clear. And again, if you already know this, then it's just a reminder. It's interesting because if you run into people, Jewish people out there, and you are part of Lapid Judaism, it might be that they, I don't know. Sometimes I say they don't accept us. That's kind of I think it's really on a case by case basis, depending on the person. But let's just say, generally speaking, we're not a quote unquote accepted in traditional Judaism. Why? Because we believe in Yeshua as the Messiah. Sometimes you might run into teachings on that I've covered these many times from anti-missionaries, and they say that Yeshua is not the Messiah. And one of the reasons he's not the Messiah, one of the biggest reasons, actually, the reason that Tovia Singer talks about quite often, is that Yeshua died, and so any Messiah who dies, according to Judaism, is obviously not the Messiah. Duh. Well, what's never talked about, though, and I think it's interesting, is the fact that Chabad absolutely believes that Rabbi Schneerson, who they just simply refer to as the Rebi, was in fact and is in fact the Messiah. And so when we arrived at this facility to eat, there's a big, giant picture on the outside of the building, as well as a couple of different places inside the building, and it's his portrait, and it's a particular portrait. It's a specific portrait of Rabbi Schneerson, and you'll see it if you ever go to a Chabad facility of any kind. You'll see this portrait on the wall, and the portrait is there because they believe he's the Moshiach. What's interesting with Chabad is that they usually don't. Although I was just told this morning that somebody had a different experience. But usually they don't say the quiet part out loud. You're not going to see, as an example, if you at a Chabad facility, or if you're talking to a Chabadnik, you're not going to hear them say, Schneerson is the Mashiach, the Rebbe's the Messiah. you're not going to see that in their literature necessarily. It's going to be alluded to. It's again, it's the quiet part. Sometimes they say the quiet part out loud. However, in Israel, you'll see billboards and banners and things that have the picture of the Rebi, and the banner will say in Hebrew, and Chanei HaMashiach, Chanei HaMelech, which is behold the Messiah, behold the King, and it's his picture. So clearly, right? But really, what I really wanted to articulate this morning is that Chabad absolutely 100,000% believes that the Rebi is the Messiah. He was the seventh Rebi of Chabad. They have never replaced him. There's not another Rebi of Chabad. That's because they believe he's still like living. There's even some Chabadniks who believe that he's resurrected. The rabbi, by the way, the Rebi, I should say, died in 1996. So much for the Jews don't believe in a Messiah who dies, right? True, and I could talk about Breslov, who believes that Nachman is the Moshiach. He died in the 1700s. So just know, two things I just wanted to articulate to you, just so in case, just for your education. Number one, Chabad 100,000% believes that the Rebbe Schneerson is the Moshiach, 100,000%. The Rebbe is dead. They believe, some of them. And in fact, at a lot of Chabad meetings, they will actually put out a chair because they believe the Rebbe is joining them. And they pray to the Rebbe. They go to his grave. They say, no, they don't pray to him. Yes, they do. They actually do pray to him. They write letters to him still today. The letters in the form of a prayer. That is 100% fact. You say, no, Rabbi, you misunderstand. Jews pray at the grave of saints, but they don't pray to the saint. They pray to God, and they on the merit of the saint. That's true. That you're right about that. That is true. That's not what Chabad does. Chabad goes to his grave at 770, and they pray to him. That is 100% true. They also believe that he was the Torah manifest. That's also true. This is all documented. I'm not making this up. And he's also dead. And they believe some anyway believe that he's resurrected to new life. Now, I say this so that you can be comforted in your Judaism, right? Because you've been told that, oh wait, believing in a resurrected Messiah is totally not Jewish. That's not true. Okay. So I just want you to be aware of this fact. And one last thing on this topic. Again, this is just as a reminder to me, and I thought I would share it with you this morning. I know for a fact, because I've had these kind of conversations, there are plenty of traditionally Orthodox Jewish people, rabbis, who do not accept Chabad. They believe that they are a messianic cult, and basically they won't have anything to do with them. Having said that, you might ask the question, well, if this is all true, then why are they so accepted in the ranks of Judaism? I mean, really, Chabad in a lot of ways is kind of central to Judaism. So what's the deal? What's the dealio? Well, the answer is Torah. Bum, 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 bum. It's Torah, ladies and gentlemen. The reason that Christianity, let's go all the way back to, it wasn't Christianity, but obviously, it was people who were Jews who believed in the Messiah. They were all accepted. Even if you believe the book of Acts, because this is also a falsehood. Aaron Prop, thank you, Aaron, for being here. Aaron Prop says only a few, all caps, only a few in Chabad really do. I've never encountered any in my time in Denver, or where else, blah blah, that believes so. Actually, Aaron, that is false. I'm here to tell you, the idea that only a few Chabadniks believe that he's Messiah is 100% false. 100% false. You might think it's a few, but it is not. In fact, I was having a conversation a few years ago with a rabbi here in Dallas. We were having a lunch and we were talking about this very topic. He's not Chabad. And I mentioned that what I've just said this morning, and that rabbi said, "Well, I don't know if I think it's kind of more of a smaller percentage." And I looked at him and I said, "Rabbi, and I know that it's the vast majority of Chabad believes this." And he acquiesced and said, "Yeah, you're right." So, Aaron, I don't know. I mean, your experience is subjective and so forth, but I can just tell you for 100% sure, for sure, that we just had a Chabadnik actually visit our synagogue just this last Shabbat and affirmed that they believe that Schneerson is Messiah. But listen, you don't have, if you've ever been to Israel, Aaron, you will see billboards all over the place that have the Rebi's picture, and it says Chanei HaMashiach, Chanei HaMelech. Well, you don't put that on there if you don't think the guy is the Messiah. I'm sorry, that's just not going to happen. So, but listen, take my word for it. It is a fact. It's not. I'm not making this up. And I just wanted to let everybody know because I think it'd be interesting. But going back to the idea, so the original believers of the Messiah, they were Jews and they were well accepted. And if you believe the book of Acts, then you know this to be true because in the book of Acts, they're brought in and said, "Hey, stop teaching in this name" or whatever. But they're never told you're not really Jewish, right? Because you know something, there's really in Judaism, this is something that Christians don't know. There is no such thing as any type of law that prohibits anybody from believing in a particular Messiah. So the whole idea that Paul was running around persecuting Jews, well, he wasn't doing that at the bequest of the Sanhedrin, unless the Sanhedrin was made up of a bunch of Roman lackeys, because there's nothing in Judaism to prosecute anybody for. You can, in Judaism, and I've kind of said this tongue in cheek, but it's somewhat true. You can believe that Daffy Duck is the Messiah, and there's nothing, nobody can lay a glove on you. It's not a thing. So you certainly can't kill anybody for that. Can't kill anybody for that. So you say, well, why did the people want to kill Messiah? Well, the people who wanted to kill the Messiah were Sadducees, and they were loyal to Caesar, and they wanted to kill him because he was potentially, in their mind, starting a rebellion against Caesar, who was not just their guy, but also the guy who was financing them. You understand that Caiaphas was in his position as high priest directly because of Caesar, by way of Governor Pontius Pilate. Pontius Pilate is the one who put Caiaphas as the high priest. So you can understand that Caiaphas is like, ruh-roh, we can't have this guy become the Messiah, because if he becomes a Messiah, he's going to know that I'm a fraud, and he's going to depose me, and I'm going to lose my position, which, by the way, the high priest is a pretty powerful role. And so I can't have that happen. So let's crucify this fruitcake. Why? Because I want Caesar to stay in power, because with Caesar's in power, I'm in power. So it's all a political play. But the original believers were Jews who practiced Judaism. Okay? And so what happened later was that Paul and his disgusting, heretical, uncircumcised message came along, and he pardon the expression, bastardized the whole thing. And then it became a moment in which now you have people who are following, allegedly, a Jewish Messiah who are living like uncircumcised Gentiles. And that is the big distinguishing factor. So here you have Chabad, who absolutely 100,000% believe that Schneerson is the Moshiach. They all believe that, okay? Now, I say all believe that. Might you find a couple of people who attend Chabad and they're on the fringes who aren't really convinced? Sure, but I'm talking about the rank and file, the leaders, the rabbis. You better believe that every Chabad rabbi believes that Schneerson is the Moshiach. I'm telling you right now. Everyone. In fact, here, if you don't believe me, contact your local Chabad rabbi and say, can you tell me right now with certainty that Schneerson is not the Messiah? And watch them go, try it. I guarantee you. But so what is it with Chabad? Why are they accepted? Answer, because they follow the Torah. And that's the kicker, ladies and gentlemen. It's the Torah, which is the linchpin that keeps us connected to the community. It's not the Messiah. Now, I know I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, and that's not really not a tangent. That's not the right word on a whole discussion, but I think it's important. What keeps the Jew tethered to the community is not faith in Messiah, but rather fidelity to Torah. The reason for this is because, and this last thing I'll say on this topic, the reason for this is that the Messiah is a very esoteric concept. That's why it's not codified in Jewish law. There's nowhere in Jewish law that codifies what we must or must not believe about the Moshiach. You say, well, didn't Rambam write some stuff? Yeah, he did. But his writings, ladies and gentlemen, are not Jewish law. The Mishnah Torah is not halakha. Why? Because a single rabbi can't come up with halakha. Okay? I don't care who you are. Only the Sanhedrin can come up with halakha. So the Mishnah Torah is merely Rambam's opinion. But there's nothing in halakha that codifies what we can or can't believe about the Moshiach. Why? Because it's so esoteric. As a result, the only thing that can be codified is actual Torah law. And that's what keeps us tethered. And that's why it's so important. And that's why Paul fought against it so much. Because he didn't want there to be Jews in Judaism. For who knows what reason. I have my suspicions, but who knows what reason. Anyway, I hope this discussion has been educational. I wanted to just share that with you. It was on my mind. I found it interesting as we were there and I was looking around. But now let's get back. Now that we're 20 minutes into this, let's get back to our topic of the wells, because it kind of plays together. Because what we're doing here at Lapid Judaism is we are redigging wells that were dug by the fathers and covered up by the uncircumcised Philistines. Good morning, Cara. Good to see you. Good morning, Sergio. Good morning, Hepzibah and Brenda and Nellie Grace. Good morning, Jacqueline and Miriam. Good morning, Shoshana and Ami. Good morning, Jubilee and Ahava and Chris and Crystal. Good morning, Baraka. Good morning, Beard of Prey. And good morning, Yonina, who is formerly from Georgia. Good morning, Heather Wilson. Hope you and Zachary are doing great. Good morning, Micaiah, and let's see, Kayla and Rob, and the Rebbe scene, the little butterfly. There she is. Good morning to, let's see, Sergio, and who else did I miss? Sarah. I hope you and Shannon are fantastic. Good morning, Shmuel. Top of the morning to you. Good morning, Timothy, and Hannah, and Leah, and Greg. Bonjour to you, Ariella. Guten Morgen to you, Denise. Hello, Kathy. Who else do we have? Hello, Cactus Annie. The unsinkable Cactus Annie. How are you? Good morning, Johanna, Leah. Good to see you. Let's see who. Anna, good morning to you. Good to see you. Je te suis, matoi. Good morning, Shoshana Brenner. And Brenda Milka, good morning to you. Hope you and Zara are doing great. Good. Did I say good morning, Miriam? Good morning, Miriam. Good morning, Ma Perkins. And who else do we have? Levi, Boker Tov, sir. Just scanning here to make sure I don't forget anybody. Did I say good morning, Hepzibah? Good morning, Hepzibah. Hope all of y'all are doing fantastic. Scanning. Jatwata, zatui, jatwatu. Balaton, zatwa, latu, jatwa. Talented Mana, good morning. Watching from Kenya. Well, welcome aboard. Glad you're here. Literal Cats, interesting name. Good morning to you. Hope you're doing great. And Roy, Boker Tov to all of you. All right, awesome. Let's look at some insights here related. This is going to be talking to us from the introduction to our parasha here in the Kehot Humash. It says, the subject of Parashat Toldot is Isaac, Abraham's heir and successor. Isaac was the child of Abraham and Sarah's old age, the son for whom they had prayed and waited for decades. It says that the Torah presents a picture of us for Isaac in many ways. It seems to be the antithesis of all that we've come to know about Abraham. It's true, it says, that Isaac is no less devoted to carrying out God's will than is Abraham, and is even prepared to sacrifice his own life without hesitation at God's behest. But in the Torah's account of Isaac's life, it says, we see no expansion of his father's great undertaking of educating humanity, no new branches in the family enterprise. So It says, unlike Abraham, Isaac's fights no great battles. He doesn't seem really to mingle very much in the worldly affairs. He never leaves the confines of the Holy Land. He takes no additional wives or even concubines in order to enlarge his immediate family. He seems content to kind of passively let life unfold around him. He is much more passively acted upon by events and circumstances than actively initiating them. In fact, his life is so bereft of activity that although he lived the longest of the patriarchs, he is the subject of only one parashah. The one and only active undertaking the Torah relates regarding Isaac is that he dug wells. Okay? And all of this and all these things, the only achievement the illustrious heir to Abraham's legacy is capable of is digging wells. So this is interesting because, Abraham was out, man. He was moving and shaking. He was trying to win souls. He was very evangelical, trying to win people over to his line of thinking. And Isaac doesn't seem to be all that evangelical. He seems to be rather passive. Okay. Good morning, Jennifer Murray from the United Kingdom. Hope you're doing fantastic. It says here, on the other hand, the Torah records no hint that anyone, not Abraham, not even God himself, was in any way dissatisfied by Isaac's apparent passivity. It says there seems to be a tacit understanding that Isaac was doing exactly what he was supposed to do, quietly, without any fanfare, without, he continued his father's enterprise, but he did so kind of, under the radar somewhat. So it says here, Isaac understood, and in all likelihood, so did Abraham, that as revolutionary and necessary as Abraham's work was, it was by nature of limited effect. Abraham's method of disseminating divine consciousness was to spread it to everyone, to reach the widest possible audience by making no prior demands on his listeners. Come as you are. Now, by the way, before I continue reading, let me just say, kind of give away the story here, and that is to say that Isaac redigging the wells of his father is metaphorically understood to mean that Isaac is kind of renewing, reviving the converts that Abraham had made who had kind of drifted away because of the Philistines, and because of the false teachings of the Philistines, kind of sucked back into idolatry. So the redigging of wells is metaphoric in the sense that Isaac is trying to regain the hearts and minds of those converts, and he's taking a little bit different tactic. Abraham was kind of indicative of hey, come as you are, come one, come all. There's really kind of no rules, just right. And it wasn't really quite like that, but it was more kind of this open message where Isaac is being a bit more focused. He says here, he made no prior demands of his listeners. This was really the only way he could succeed in publicizing his message. For since the world was not yet interested in what he had to say, stipulating conditions would have unnecessarily limited his influence. Okay, so in other words, before you can come in, you have to do this, this, and so. Okay, now, again, I'm going to use a reference to the book of Acts, chapter 15. Now, I think, frankly, my opinion about the book of Acts is that it was all phony, baloney, blast banana, good time, rock and roll, nothing more than a propaganda piece. But if we look at Acts 15, in the book of Acts, chapter 15, the apostles are sitting around wringing their hands, allegedly, trying to figure out how are we going to let the Gentiles into the covenant? How are we going to facilitate Gentiles coming into the community? Now, one of the reasons why I think that the book of Acts is completely false is because that entire discussion is completely silly. I mean, it's really ridiculous. It's absurd. It's ludicrous. Why? Well, because Gentiles have been coming into Judaism for centuries, for millennia. I mean, there are so many converts in the Bible. There's literally millions of converts, actually. But biblically, I mean, one of the converts is Obadiah. Okay. But see, Christians are led to believe that prior to Messiah, Gentiles were out. There was a big, huge wall, and it was a big old sign that said, no, thank you, go someplace else. And that Gentiles never were allowed into the covenant. And that's just simply false. That's all false. Many, many, many Gentiles converted to Judaism, became fully Jewish. And so the idea that you would have to sit around and say, well, golly, guys, I don't know, Luke, how do you think we ought to let them in? I don't know, man. We haven't done this in a long time. I mean, it's just silly and dumb because we've been doing this for thousands of years. So the writer of Acts is trying to gaslight you into thinking that Gentiles weren't let into the community until just now. We had to figure out what that's going to look like. But in Acts 15, they're given 4 rules. Okay. Not allowed, got to stop your, immorality, got to stop going to idolatrous places. Which, by the way, Paul said is okay to go to an idolatrous temple as long as nobody sees you do it. So how does that mesh? And then the apostles also said you got to not eat blood and don't eat meat strangled. So 2 of the 4 rules have to do with kosher eating. In other words, you have to start eating kosher. Don't eat blood and don't eat meat strangled. Meat strangled means treifa. Don't eat meat that has not been properly sacrificed. I mean, not sacrificed, pardon me, that's wrong. Not properly slaughtered, sorry. So it has to do with kosher eating. So, and the other 2 things have to do with idolatry, okay? And that was it. These were called prerequisites. So before you take calculus, you have to take, math 1 or 2 or whatever it is. Algebra, I'm sorry. Algebra, what am I talking about? Before you take calculus, you have to take algebra 1 and 2. That's what I was trying to think of. Right? Those are called prerequisites, okay? Before you go to law school, you have to have, your prerequisite is you have to have a bachelor's degree, right? These are called prerequisites, okay? So the 4 laws are not like, this is all you have to do your whole life, which, by the way, Gentiles today who are Christians aren't doing them. They all participate in idolatry, and they all eat non-kosher. So basically, if they say, all we have to do is Acts 15, well, you're not doing that, so what's your deal? So these are called prerequisites. So before, what it's saying here is that Abraham had no prerequisites. And the problem is that did not have very good results. Yes, a lot of people accepted Abraham's message, but they didn't stay. It didn't stick. Okay. And some people believe, we don't like to have prerequisites because we just want everybody to come in, no rules, just right, have your Aussie fries, and that's it. And the problem is that that's all sounds good and well and everything, but it doesn't last. The fries get soggy. The awesome blossom. What is that? The onion thing? Whatever. It says here, it says the disadvantage of this approach of not requiring prerequisites was that by not requiring anything like that, by not requiring any preparatory work from his audience, Abraham did not affect any permanent change in them. Boom. Boom. No permanent change. Okay. So, I do believe, as much as I think that Acts is a book of just, it's made up. By the way, again, I'm sorry. I say these things because I know people listen to me who maybe you're new. Okay. There is a lie that you'll hear in church, and that is that Luke wrote Acts. That is a complete false. That is completely made up. Okay. You say, well, I've heard that my whole life. I heard that Luke wrote Acts. Right. It's a complete fantasy. Okay. The reality is the book of Acts is a anonymous work. Scholars, people who actually study this stuff as professors, have no idea who wrote Acts. No idea. The church developed the tradition that Luke wrote it only so that it would have credibility. But there's no evidence to support that at all. In addition, most actual vetted scholars will tell you that Luke, at the very earliest, was written in 85, and more likely well into the 2nd century, at which point, even at 85, Luke was dead. Okay, so it's been my experience. You might have a different experience. My experience is that dead men tell no tales. So it's quite impossible for someone who has died to actually write a letter. That's what I have come to learn in my life. Now, you might have a different experience, but Luke did not write Acts. So I just want to throw that out there. Having said that, having now totally thrown Acts under the bus, and rightfully so, there are things in Acts that are true, because you can't sell a complete lie. You have to have truth mixed in with it a little bit. Everybody knows that. So what's true about Acts 15 as an example? Well, it's true that a prerequisite for non-Jews was got to start eating kosher, and you got to stop practicing idolatry, which, by the way, the church does neither of those things. The church says, hey, you have an idolatrous party called Christmas? That's awesome. We'll just Christianize it. You don't have to stop doing it. That'd be stupid. Let's just Christianize it and make it now a Christian party. Yay. Oh, you have a celebration that honors the dead and the occult and witches and warlocks and demons, and you just celebrate this, and it's called Halloween. Awesome. You have to stop doing it. That's silly. We're just going to Christianize it. Yay. And we'll call it trunk or treat, and it'll be just awesome. Oh, you have to don't eat blood. Oh, who told you that? You can eat whatever you want. So, but in Judaism, it is true that this was a prerequisite. If you wanted to come into the community and you wanted to go through the process of conversion, then you had to you had to eat kosher, and you had to stop practicing idolatry. So yeah, so that part's true. Aaron says Luke, Acts. First of all, Aaron, Luke did not write Acts. So it's not Luke Acts. There's not a scholar on the planet who refers to Acts as Luke Acts. Luke Acts. That's just silly. Uses all the works of Josephus as a source. No, it doesn't. That's completely false. So Aaron, I don't know who you are, but there isn't anything you've said yet that is true. And I just want to let everybody know that. God love Aaron, but that is not true. There's no such thing as Luke Acts. I don't know where you got that. But he uses all the works of Josephus. That is completely false. Completely false. In fact, Aaron, here's what you can do. Send us an email. You can do it at keturah@lapidjudaism.org, and go ahead and cite Josephus. I have the works of Josephus, all of them. Go ahead and cite Josephus and where that is cited in Acts. That would be an interesting exercise. Go ahead and take the time to do that and email that to us. We'll wait for that. So thank you for that, but it's completely false. All right, so it says here, when we read an assignment before hearing a lecture, this is talking about prerequisites and why they're important. We are much better able to absorb the content of the lecture than rather just hearing it cold. Okay. If the subject matter is the subject as we're before we enter the lecture hall, and we're certainly not affected. I'm sorry. Let me reread that. I'm sorry. If the subject matter is totally new to us, I missed that part. Excuse me. We are likely to not understand a word and walk away as ignorant of the subject as we were before we entered the lecture hall, and certainly not be affected by what we've heard. Okay, so this is talking about if we prepare ourselves, then we're much more likely to absorb the content of what we're hearing. Okay, this is why many teachers assign homework. Read this chapter before we come in for tomorrow's class. So you're kind of greasing the proverbial skids there. It says, similarly, Abraham may have impressed and inspired his audience, but since he did not require them, to do any homework, that is, to follow up his teachings by refining themselves further, they could not attain any levels of divine consciousness higher than those that he could impose upon them. They remained essentially unchanged by his teachings. This is not meant to belittle, it says, the tremendous impact of Abraham's effort. He influenced thousands of people and attracted a sizable following. But these masses were nourished wholly by his inspiration, his charisma, his personal example. When they left his presence and resumed their own lives, their enthusiasm waned. Okay? So this is why the faith message has been a complete failure, because there's no requirement to do anything. It says Isaac sensed that the very approach responsible for the outstanding success of his father's program was paradoxically also the great threat to its perpetuation. Okay. He understood that in order to ensure the continued success of his father's undertaking, his own discipline, strictness, rigorousness, and respect for standards would now have to complement his father's loving kindness. So this is what the reality is that what it's trying to say here is that, yes, there needs to be a message of love and kindness and acceptance, and it has to be coupled with standards. Because if there aren't any standards, then there won't be any growth. And this is what people don't know. People think, well, we don't want any rules. Just come as you are, blah, blah, blah. And that never works in any way. There has to be standards. And those standards are what make us grow. It says that Isaac introduced into Abraham's program the ideal of self-refinement, of encouraging the disciple to assume responsibility for laying the spiritual groundwork before hearing the master's lesson. Whereas Abraham's approach can be conceived of as a downward vector, bringing divinity down to even the lowest rungs of humanity, Isaac's approach can be conceived of as an upward vector, elevating people so that they can integrate increasingly higher levels of divine consciousness into their life. In other words, when we give people standards, that we're elevating them. Okay? We're encouraging them to rise up. So it says, this is precisely the message Isaac communicated to the world by digging wells. As opposed to filling a pit with water brought from elsewhere, digging a well reveals an already existing source of water merely concealed beneath layers of earth. If Abraham's message to the world was, come revive your jaded, insensate minds with the refreshing water of divine consciousness, Isaac's message was, now that you have been revived, look for your own source of water. Okay? Dig away all the dirt. Rid yourself of the filth encumbering your life, and you will reveal within yourself a wellspring of divine awareness that will serve to quench your spiritual thirst your whole lifetime. Isn't that great? Now that you have been revived, look for your own source of water. Dig away all the dirt. Rid yourself of all the filth that encumbers your life, and then you'll reveal within yourself a wellspring of life. Isn't that awesome? You have to do the work. Okay. Aaron is trying to give me an example. Listen, Aaron, you're not going to convince anybody on this thread. I promise you. You're certainly not going to convince me. I don't know what you mean by other zealots. Rambam Galel mentioned Acts 5. You're talking about when Gamliel was talking about the other examples of people who were messianic. Okay. Listen, Aaron, you're not going to be able to put all your footnotes in the chat. Email them to us. Keturah, put your email if you're listening, in the chat. But email them to us, Aaron. I'd like to see, you said that Luke is nothing but, I guess it's nothing but Josephus's references. That's not true. But we would like, and I can tell you right now, there might be a similarity between what Gamliel said and what Josephus said, but it's not exactly the same. But listen, thank you for being here, Aaron. Just put them in an email and send it to me, and I'll help you with that later. Appreciate that very much. So now we have to understand that what Isaac is telling people is, look, you have to do the work. This is why Torah observance is so crucial. You have to do the work. You have to do the study. You have to do the investigating. You have to read and study for yourself. You know, there are people who tell me all the time, such as this conversation about Josephus. Well, you know, Acts has Josephus. I can tell you, and I don't know about Aaron specifically, but 9 times out of 10, I can go to my library right now and pull Josephus off the shelf. And I bet you that most people have to go to the internet and try to look it up. In other words, you don't even have the material. So you're like, well, no, I know the Talmud says it. Do you own a copy? No, I don't. I have to go and look at No. You have to invest in the resources yourself. I don't look anything up online. If I'm reading a resource or an insight, I get that many of my insights from online sources. I don't use Sephariah. I don't. I have a library. I look it up myself and reference. I'm not saying that to impress you necessarily. I'm saying that so that you understand that you have to do the work. You have to get in and dig. You have to read, and you can't do that online. Okay? You have to get the sources and read the sources yourself and dig into, and I'm using the word dig as like a well. You have to get in there and dig up that well stream yourself. Okay. And it goes on, it's interesting here because it talks about, he encouraged people kind of to do the work themselves. Okay. All right. It says, in this regard, Isaac was the perfect model for humanity. It says, we find him meditating in the field, shunning superficial conflict with his neighbors, constantly striving to refine himself, and always focusing inward. In this way, he reached a spiritual perfection so radiant that it, coupled with his material success, drew others to him instinctively. He had no need to seek disciples because the disciples sought him. Okay? His charismatic spirituality even won over the ruling powers who had previously banished him from their country out of jealousy of his success and a growing following. This is why this parasha is called Toldot, because which means descendants. Adam, Noah, Shem, Abraham, Jacob, even Terach, Ishmael, and Esau, all the central personalities of Genesis, had descendants, and the Torah sees fit to enumerate them. Yet it's only the chronicle of Isaac's life work as recorded in the single parasha that focused on him. This is the only one that's called Toldot. For only Isaac embodied and preached the approach that ensures lasting results, that produces disciples, one's spiritual children, capable of standing on their own. So we want to dig wells, and digging wells means we have to study for ourselves. Quick question for you, Aaron, since you're still in the chat and still think, do you actually have the works of Josephus, or do you have to look at them online? Why not use both is the question. People do use Sephariah. It's not exactly bad to do that. But there's just a difference between looking something up on the internet and actually having a physical book that you read with commentary and references and so forth and so on. And a lot of times, I'll just tell you that these books that I have will reference some other book, which will lead me to purchasing that book as a reference. And sometimes those books are out of print. You have to find them. It takes a minute to find them. But anyway, it just leads to one thing leads to another. You don't have that online. You don't have the nuances online. You don't have the commentaries online. I'm just curious. That's good. Glad you have it. Send us your, since you have that, Aaron, then you'll have no problem writing an email and sending those citations. That would be great. That would be fantastic. God bless you guys. Look forward to seeing all of you tomorrow, God willing, as we continue to study Toldot. Looking forward to Shabbat's drash as well, because there's a particular part of Toldot which is a killer to Pauline theology, an absolute killer. It's a complete destruction. It will be a nuclear bomb to Pauline theology from Toldot. I look forward to bringing that out on Shabbat. That's going to be a lot of fun. So God bless you. Thank you so much for everything, for being here. I will look forward to seeing you mañana. Until then, have a great and amazing day. Shalom Aleichem to all of you. May today be a day for you to have good news.